All right, so we've got another story for you. This is Ethan, and we're going to be talking about his symptoms of depersonalization realization. He's going through visual symptoms, brain fog, and looks like some existential obsession. Before we get into that, my name is Jordan Hardgrave. I specialize in helping people heal from complex trauma, as well as depersonalization, realization, anxiety, panic, things like that. And so if you're new to the channel, make sure to click that subscribe button. You're going to find a lot of hope, a lot of encouragement from this channel. Make sure to like if this helps you so we can spread this around. Comment something below, and let's go ahead and get to it. So the first thing Ethan says, oh yeah, by the way, there's instructions for how to email me if you want to send me your story as well in the description. Check that out. He says, it can be challenging to distinguish between what may be symptoms of depersonalization realization and my natural state, which I've experienced for a very long time. So I want to speak to that for a second. Whenever you experience anxiety, panic attacks, depersonalization realization for a very, very long time, especially several years, they become so normal that eventually you may not even see the symptoms as abnormal anymore, because it's just such an intricate part of your daily experience that you don't even see it as abnormal. You essentially get desensitized, right? So exposure is part of how we desensitize sensory triggers, because whenever you expose yourself to something, your brain assumes that it's not dangerous. And whenever you experience constant anxiety and panic and depersonalization realization for a long time, it's kind of forced exposure. So it doesn't mean that the symptoms aren't scary anymore, but what it does mean is eventually they will get desensitized to the point where it kind of is just your normal experience. And so you may not even really see anything as being too off. I remember whenever I was overcoming anxiety, finally getting out of it, as well as DPDR, I was able to look back and see all these symptoms that I actually didn't even question. I just thought it was part of who I was. One of them was cold hands and feet that I had all the time. And I suddenly was able to have some contrast once I was coming out of the symptoms, where I was like, wait a second, that's not normal. That actually was part of an anxious state. And it's amazing how many things become quote unquote normal just by default of experiencing it for a very long time. And a big fear that my clients have, and that I definitely had, is that specifically, let's say with depersonalization realization, that because you've experienced the symptoms for so long, you don't even really remember what normal feels like, right? Which this isn't everybody, by the way. Some people, the symptoms are just episodic, but there's a lot of people, they're all the time, and they've been experiencing them for such a long time that they really can't even remember what normal feels like. That was, years ago. And so the fear is that because they can't remember what normal feels like, how are they even going to notice it whenever it happens? Now, just to give you some reassurance, you will notice it. You can't not notice it, right? Whenever we're working with people and we create the conditions for healing, which are self-regulation and co-regulation, it'll start out usually as like a few seconds or a few minutes or a few hours where they'll feel either a lot more connected and normal, or they'll feel completely normal. And it just hits you like a ton of bricks. Like, it's not something that you'll miss. And what I tell people is there's only two settings in your nervous system. You've got the threat responses of fight, flight, freeze. And then once we convey enough safety through self-regulation and co-regulation, your nervous system state will change into what's called your social engagement system. This is the ventral vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. And whenever that part of the nervous system comes back online, you have connection, you can think, you can concentrate, you feel able to easily socially engage. The world becomes your playground. You feel safe in the world, safe in your body. You feel connected to your body. Everything that you want as far as how you feel will come back online whenever you're back into your social engagement system. But the reason why you're not in your social engagement system right now is because your body and life are full of things that are conveying threat, right? With the body, it's tension, adrenaline, emotion, fatigue. With life, I mean, you might be overworking yourself. You might be connected to really toxic or abusive people. Diet is definitely a factor, right? You are what you eat. Food is mood. It's really important. What are you focusing on? So what I'm saying is, to get you out of this, all we need to do is change the signals that are being sent to your nervous system by having you start to get in tune with your body, which is interoception, the experience of the embodied self, start to befriend the body, release all that buildup, and then also have co-regulation, which is working with somebody that really understands you, somebody that can convey safety, and really guide you through this process, because it's very up and down. That's what we do with our clients. So anyway, with that being said, eventually, if you convey enough safety, you will come back into your social engagement system. And once that happens, you'll know. Like, it's very apparent and you can't miss it. So it doesn't matter how long you felt abnormal, or even if you've forgotten what normal feels like, once you are back in your social engagement system, you will know it. But this person, Ethan, is saying that he's been in symptoms so long, he really just, that contrast really isn't there anymore. So he said, I would like to share some of my symptoms. Brain fog. He said, I often feel as if my mind is filled with a haze, making it difficult to concentrate. There are moments when I struggle to focus on task, almost like my gaze slips away. Absolutely. Whenever I was going through symptoms, I remember I'd be talking with people and I would try to recall information, but it's like there was this lag effect, right? So think like some dusty old computer in a library that you have to basically search for something, and then you hear like the computer making these noises, and it's like loading, and it just never seems to pull up the information. Think like dial-up internet, basically. That's how my brain felt whenever I was in a trauma/anxious state. There was like this lag, and I would just be sitting there, and it was really awkward because people would be looking at me and they'd ask me a question. I'd be like, I'm sorry, I can't think right now. And so if you're experiencing a lot of brain fog due to anxiety, due to being in a trauma state, it's probably created a lot of social awkwardness. And maybe your defense mechanism for that is just to avoid social situations, but that actually makes it worse, because whatever you run from, your brain assumes is a lion trying to eat you. So we want to do exposure paired with relaxation to desensitize that. That's part of how we're going to get your thinking brain back online, the prefrontal cortex, so you don't have brain fog. But anyway, it's extremely awkward. There's no question. So the next thing, time distortion, which, by the way, brain fog is not exclusive to a trauma state like depersonalization, realization is. You can experience brain fog and just be in an anxious state. But the next one, time distortion, that is specific to a trauma state. So he says, over the years, I've developed coping strategies to manage this symptom. While it feels like recent events are distant memories, time still seems to pass quickly. So I remember that I would be at work, and this was during like severe depersonalization, realization, and other trauma symptoms. Basically, sometimes it would feel like the whole day went by in a minute. Other times it would feel like 1 minute took an entire day. And it was really, really bizarre. And I remember observing that and noticing that, and I was like, what the freak is wrong with my brain? Like, it was just really terrifying. And so the reason why this happens is whenever you enter a trauma state, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex shuts down. This is the timekeeper of the brain. It's essentially what allows you to have an understanding of beginning, middle, and end. And so whenever the timekeeper of your brain is compromised due to being in a trauma state, your understanding of beginning, middle, and end is going to be compromised. And so time is going to feel very subjective, right? Events are going to feel very objective. The next is visual symptoms. I experience ocular migraines, visual snow, severe after images. So that's like where you look at something and then you look away, that image is kind of burned in there. And sensitivity to light. Oh my gosh, that was one of the worst symptoms that I experienced. And after working with thousands of trauma/DPR and anxiety sufferers, that is one of the most common symptoms, is light sensitivity. And the reason why this happens is because whenever your body's going into fight or flight response, your pupils will dilate to let in as much of your surroundings as possible to increase the chances of survival, right? Your brain thinks that you're basically fighting a lion or fleeing from a lion. And so by increasing the amount of sensory data that's coming in visually, it will basically increase the chances that if the lion goes left, you'll see it. If the lion jumps right, you'll see it. If the lion pounces on you, you'll see it. You basically want to be aware of absolutely everything. But what that translates into whenever there is no lion present is all of a sudden you get like visual overload. You'll go into, grocery stores, especially with fluorescent lights, and it'll just feel absolutely horrifying. Like you'll be squinting your eyes and it'll feel like you're looking into the sun. Even your iPhone or Android, I don't know why anybody would use an Android. But anyway, just kidding. But you'll look into your phone and it'll feel like you're looking into the sun, or even your computer screen, things like that. And think of it like there's a dark room, and then all of a sudden you open the window, like all the windows in the room, and the sun is just blaring into the room. Like it's going to be pretty overwhelming. So that's why that happens, but it's very common, and that's connected to your body being in fight or flight response, trying to protect you. So it's uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. Blunted emotions. So I don't always experience emotions or physical sensations as intensely as others. Sometimes even when I'm hurt, it's challenging to react strongly. Yeah, so I mean, this is part of how your body deals with traumatic emotion. So think about it like there was a house and the water is overflowing in the house. And imagine that you called out somebody from the water company and they go outside and they disconnect the main water line, right? That's kind of what our body does whenever we're not really facing our emotions and we're suppressing them, is eventually there's a point where our body thinks that we're dying, being eaten by a lion, and our body basically will start to suppress those emotions. We'll start to even numb them out completely. So that's basically a sign that there's probably some emotional suppression. The next, existential concerns. I find myself contemplating the nature of reality, existence, and fearing death more intensely than most. I haven't committed to one specific belief system due to the constant questioning. So essentially, he's questioning existence all the time. And he's saying, I haven't fully embraced some sort of existential, theory or fear or whatever, but he's saying that he is ruminating on that. And that was one of the more challenging things that I went through. I remember one time I was like pouring a glass of water, and I suddenly was like thinking, how is my hand moving this glass of water? What is water? What is a cup? And my brain was just flooding me with all these existential questions. And I would just sit and marinate on that. I would meditate on existence for hours and hours at a time. And I tried to outthink the questions. But what I teach my clients is you're not going to beat those questions by outthinking them. You actually have to step out of the boxing ring entirely, because one question is going to lead to another question, and that's going to lead to another question. What you really have to do is you have to get into your body and start to release the buildup of tension, energy, and emotion that's making you need to dissociate from your body by obsessing over existence. And then you need to just focus back on living your life. And you have to do that over and over and over again. And the mistake that people make is they think that they're going to beat the questions with their mind, and it's not going to work. You're going to spend years and years and years trying to beat these questions because they can't be answered. I mean, like, I'm a person of faith, I'm a Christian, but at the end of the day, my beliefs are still faith, right? And so it's like, if I sit and meditate on questions that technically we'll never know until after we're dead, that's going to lead to a lot of resistance and a lot of stress, right? And so you have to lay down the boxing gloves and accept that you're not going to be able to beat those with your mind. It's just not going to work. But what I will tell you is that existential obsession and rumination is one of the most common symptoms that my clients experience who come to me. So if you're experiencing that, you're not alone, and don't get sucked into the existential wormhole. If you've ever seen the movie A Bug's Life, there's like that little bug that's like flying towards the bug zapper, and one of the other bugs is like, don't look at the light. And the bug's like, I can't help it. It's so pretty. And then anyway, that's kind of how it is with existential questions and rumination. Like they lure you in, but you cannot get in the boxing ring because you are going to lose. They are going to beat you because they can't be answered. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, pursue existence at some point, and or as far as the meaning of existence, but now is not the time. Right? Let's wait until you're in a little bit better of a state is what I tell people. Okay, we're almost done. Memory challenges. So this is definitely specific to a trauma state. I struggle with short-term memory recall, often needing to revisit recent information. It eventually becomes long-term memory, but it's a slower process. Yeah. So whenever you experience a trauma state, your memory transitions from registering as explicit narrative-based memory, and it turns into implicit procedural memory. And with explicit narrative-based memory, you've got a narrative, right? So let's say you go to the movies. Well, if you're experiencing normal memory, you'll be able to remember the beginning, the middle, and the end. But whenever you're in a trauma state, you're essentially going to experience a fragmented memory where you may remember just bits and pieces of it, but you may not remember anything at all. And also remember, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is shut down, the timekeeper, so that really throws everything off as far as understanding of beginning, middle, and end. And so with implicit procedural memory, basically what your brain does is it assigns the procedure of fight, flight, freeze response to certain sensory data, but there's no story. And what that translates into is you may be standing at the gas pump and your body's going into full fight, flight, freeze response, and you have absolutely no idea why it's happening. Welcome to trauma memory. And that makes people feel like they're going crazy. Because why is my heart pounding right now whenever I'm just trying to eat a piece of pizza with my family? Why am I at a football game and all I want to do is just leave and I feel like there's threat everywhere? Well, it's because you've got the procedure of fight, flight, freeze response with no story attached to it. And you don't know what the trigger is, but your brain does. There's some sort of sensory data that your brain has picked up on that is similar to something painful from your past, and your body is activating fight, flight, freeze response to try to defend you. But you don't have any narrative, so it just simply makes you feel like you're going crazy. So with that being said, lastly, feeling disconnected. It's hard to describe. Sorry, I want to go a little bit further on the memory really fast. So our memory actually increases in how good it is the more that adrenaline increases, up until the point of overwhelm and terror. That's whenever trauma memory kicks in. So let me give you, for example, for the people that are a little bit older, if you remember what happened on 9/11, everybody remembers what happened on 9/11 that was of age to remember. And the reason why is because you got a huge adrenaline spike and it made your memory start to register a lot more accurately. Right? And this is technically a defense mechanism because, let's say we were in the African savannah and we got an adrenaline spike. Our brain is really going to want to make sure that it takes snapshots of what's going on for our future survival, right? But you don't remember what happened the day before 9/11 because it was probably just a regular, ordinary, boring day and there wasn't enough adrenaline in your bloodstream to really capture a vivid memory. And so imagine that you're on a roller coaster, right? And your adrenaline is rising and you're very, very aware of everything that's happening. But then let's say that there's a point, though, that you hit a point of overwhelm and terror. It's at that point that your memory stops registering very accurately and your memory fragments. It's like a plate that busts into 1,000 pieces. I think this is probably a trauma defense mechanism, so we're not so overwhelmed by the trauma if we remember it in the future. But anyway, let's say that after that moment, you try to recall anything past that point of overwhelm on the roller coaster, you're not going to be able to probably remember much at all. You may get bits and pieces, sounds, and a few visuals here and there. So that's kind of how trauma memory works, right? Is it really depends on how much adrenaline is in your bloodstream. And once you hit that overwhelm point with adrenaline, that's whenever trauma memory kicks in. So if you're able to remember something very, very vividly, it probably wasn't a traumatic situation. So with that being said, lastly, feeling disconnected from my own decisions. And the last one is strange body sensation. I'm frequently adjusting my glasses because I sense something is off with my body's alignment. It feels like my shoulder is ahead of my hips. This lack of body awareness can lead to accidents. Yeah, so I mean, this person is, it seems like, which this isn't a diagnosis or anything like that, but this person seems to be experiencing a lot of depersonalization. You basically just don't feel settled in your body. You don't feel at home in your body. I remember for me, it felt like I was kind of a little outside of myself and kind of to the left. It wasn't like a full out-of-body experience, but I didn't feel in sync with my body. My body essentially felt like a suit that I was wearing versus something that I was, intimately connected with, and my head felt off. It's like I was viewing my body through a camera, basically, that was kind of hovering, almost like Super Mario, like that little camera that floated around. Yeah, pretty terrifying for sure. But anyway, This person says, as for the impact on my life, I've managed to function well externally, holding a good job and having a loving spouse. However, I sometimes struggle to feel genuine pride in my achievements, and I tend to prioritize others' happiness over my own. Yeah, and that's part of what we have to fix. Like, you have to have boundaries, right? You're not a machine. I tell my clients this all the time. Like, you don't have unlimited energy, and you have to accept this. And part of what leads to overwhelm in the nervous system is that people are giving out more energy than they have to give. They're writing checks that their body and their energy levels can't cash. And so typically what happens is people have boundaries, and then it ticks somebody off. And that leads to a lot of emotional distress. And our brain registers emotional distress and physical pain as the same thing. And so our brain thinks that that rejection is dangerous. It goes back to the tribal days where you had to be in a tribe to survive. And so getting rejected from the tribe would mean that you died. That's why the fear of public speaking is one of the number one fears in the world. But anyway, and so as a defense mechanism to prevent further pain, you're like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that ever again. I'm going to make sure that whatever people need, I'm going to give it to them. But the problem is that's not sustainable, right? You have to accept that when you have boundaries to guard your energy, you are eventually going to tick somebody off. But here's the thing. If somebody gets ticked off because you have boundaries, that's actually a good thing, because that reveals that that's a person that you don't need to connect with. Because anybody who doesn't respect the fact that you are mindful of your energy and your fatigue is not somebody that you need to have in your life anyway. So 99% of people are going to understand and respect your boundaries optimistically, but there's always going to be that 1% that's going to get ticked off. But don't base your boundaries off of that 1%. Forget those people, right? You can't please everybody. If you have boundaries, you are going to upset people. And if you don't have boundaries, you may make 100% of people happy, but you're going to compromise your energy and you're going to add more stress, all to appease that 1%. Don't do that. It's not worth it, right? And so part of what I do with people is I have them set up boundaries with people, with work, right? And you have to take care of yourself. One of my mentors said this. He's like, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And that really, really helped me, because I was a people pleaser and I wanted to make everybody happy. I wanted people to like me. Technically speaking, you need to also work on developing your sense of self, focus on good things about yourself. Maybe all you do is focus on the bad. Write out 5 or 6 things that are good about yourself and speak that out every day. Then also learn how to handle failure and weaknesses. Whenever you have a failure, see it as an opportunity for growth. Whenever you manifest weakness, learn how to laugh at yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. Nobody has this standard of perfection for yourself that you have, right? And it's causing a lot of stress. And so once you really develop a sense of self, you know that there's very positive things about yourself, independent of what people think of you. Then you also learn how to deal with failure and weakness. All of a sudden, if people reject you, you've now got a foundation to stand upon. So that's really important too. But you really do have to make a decision. Like, you're either going to make everybody happy, and you are stressed and fatigued all the time, or you make most people happy and piss some people off, but you are able to have energy to pour out to your friends and family. Because that's the thing, is if you're wasting all your energy on these people that you don't have energy for, that's energy that you now are not going to have for your friends and family. So you really do have to make this decision, right? Anyway, I faced significant difficulties growing up, dealing with parents who were mentally unwell and neglectful. While not physically abusive, their instability and lack of emotional safety profoundly affected me. I experienced ridicule for expressing my opinions and was pushed into working for their businesses, leaving me with little escape. So there's a quote that really impacted me when I heard it a few years ago. Trauma is not just the bad things that happen to you. It's also the good things that should have happened to you but didn't, right? Growing up in an environment where maybe it wasn't abusive, but you didn't have anybody to provide co-regulation. Maybe you had a very dysregulated caregiver, whether it's your parents or grandparents or whoever, and you also didn't learn how to self-regulate. Nobody taught you how to relax, how to deal with your emotions. In fact, I actually am working with like 3 people right now as my clients where their parents taught them that emotions are bad. Their parents, maybe they were good people, but their parents probably did the same thing, and it just becomes this generational cycle. They basically taught them that you need to stuff down your emotions. And a few of them are men, and their fathers associated processing emotion with a lack of masculinity. But emotion has nothing to do with being masculine or feminine. It's a biological need that your body has to process things. And once I started to understand that, it really, really helped me. Like, this isn't a masculine feminine thing. This is a human biology thing. And tears are liquid healing. Like, your body needs to cry sometimes. And once you allow the emotion to peak and process, now it's out of your body. You're going to be less stressed and you're going to be able to move on. But if you ever find yourself being extremely easily emotionally dysregulated, just little things just really upset you or whatever, it's probably because you're suppressing your emotions. And so it's all building up. And so basically, our brain is forming the template by which we're going to interpret future human experiences whenever we're children, especially between the ages of 0 and 2. But pretty much like 0 and 12 seems to be like the golden time where your brain is really, really determining what the heck's going on. How do we respond in this situation? What is our perspective of this, and that? And so if you've got dysregulated caregivers, like, you're starting out life with a neurological template that is wired to perceive threat where there is no threat everywhere. And you're wired in such a way that it's not conducive for health and wellness. So here's the thing. I want you to just accept the cards that were dealt to you. You can't change that. But now let's change that deck of cards, right? Like, accept the deck of cards from the past, but now it's time to go ahead and buy a new deck. Right? And what that looks like is rewiring your brain, neuroplasticity. Like, you're not stuck like this. Like, you can rewire your brain. It doesn't matter how wired you are right now to suppress your emotions, or to not have boundaries with people, or to neglect your body, or to connect with toxic and abusive people, right? You can change those things. And I know this because I did it. I was connected to so many people. I connected with a total of 3 different people who had narcissistic personality disorder that robbed so many years of my life and abused me mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, in so many different ways. But I made a decision. Enough is enough. And thank God my eyes were open, because a lot of them, 2 out of 3 of them were actually covert narcissists, which they're very good at concealing their narcissism. So I didn't even know I was under narcissistic abuse for a long time. But anyway, I made a decision that enough is enough. And you can do the same thing, right? And you can rewire your brain regardless of how terrible your childhood was or what you missed out in childhood. You can rewire your brain. And as far as experiencing ridicule for expressing your opinions, you know, that basically causes you to avoid being an individual. And that's problematic, because if you're not an individual, you're probably going to let people run all over you, right? See, you not being able to express your opinions is representative of I can't be myself. And so in order to adapt in that environment, you had to basically compromise your individualism. And that's what happens with narcissistic abuse, by the way, because it's very difficult to control somebody who's an individual, who has their own opinion, who has their own style, who makes their own decisions, who thinks how they want to think. And so if you're under an abusive environment or toxic environment, but this especially happens in abusive situations, you'll find that in order to adapt, you have to forfeit individualism. That's why a big part of healing from, let's say, narcissistic abuse, or in this case, healing from that childhood environment, is you start to become an individual again, right? You first need to disconnect from the source of the toxicity or the abuse, but you start to ask yourself, what is my opinion about this? What are my thoughts? What do I want to do? Who do I want to hang out with? And you really start to become an individual again. So the next thing, and this is the very last thing, guys. I know it's been a longer video, but we're almost done. In terms of coping mechanisms, I've tried several approaches. Meditation, taking a few moments to be present, and still has been helpful in calming my mind. Absolutely. But the problem is, if your body is full of tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue, it becomes very difficult to be in the present moment, because to be in the present moment requires you to be safely embodied. So because of your painful history, that created lots of sensory triggers that are constantly putting the body in fight, flight, freeze response. And so that makes it very difficult to be safely embodied and to be in the present moment. And so I remember I tried to do like some meditation and stuff whenever I was going through symptoms, and it was like hell on earth. I was like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't even become in my body for just a few seconds even, because it was so terrifying. It sounds like you're having some good results, which is awesome. But the more that your body is in a trauma response, the harder that it's going to be to get into the present moment, because you have to be safely embodied for that. And trauma is a body that is constantly preparing for a threat that never comes. And so if your body is chock full of tension, adrenaline, emotion, fatigue, it's going to be extremely difficult to be in the present moment, and you're going to find that you're missing out on so many of life's precious moments because of that. So that's why it's always so cool when we work with people, because once we can get your body out of fight, flight, freeze through self-regulation and co-regulation, there's a restoration of being in the present moment, and you can be there to open presents with your kids on Christmas morning and actually be there, not just be, physically present, but mentally absent. You're actually able to be present with them. And, some people, we've had clients that go on to get married, and they actually are able to enjoy their wedding and travel and go to school and just so much family time. And it's just amazing what happens once you're back in your body. So, stretching, incorporating daily stretching, especially after losing weight, has increased my awareness of my body. Stretching is amazing. Awesome. Substance use, alcohol was detrimental, but marijuana has been somewhat beneficial, helping me confront my thoughts rather than escaping them. Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to tell people whether they should or should not, smoke marijuana or anything like that. But what I will tell you is, I know so many people that smoke weed all the time, and they're some of the most emotionally dysregulated people that I've ever seen. Doesn't make them bad people, but for some, I'm not saying all, marijuana or other drugs can be an attempt to numb and mitigate a lot of emotional distress in the body, and a lot of fatigue, and there's a lot of life situations that they need to confront that they're not confronting, and they're just kind of numbing. And so I don't want to lump all marijuana users into that category, obviously. And don't forget, for those of you who follow my channel, I mean, I smoked marijuana back in 2008, and that's what initially led to me entering a trauma state. And so I myself was looking to marijuana. It did make me a bad person, but it wasn't fixing the issues that I needed to fix. So whenever that becomes a replacement for addressing the things in your life and body, that's what I would say is very, very problematic. And I understand that there's like medicinal uses, like some people have medical issues that marijuana can help. Again, I know that kind of becomes a political subject or whatever. I'm not here to judge anybody, but I will tell you, sometimes people bypass actually dealing with their issues through drugs, and that's whenever it's very, very problematic. And I would also say, just objectively speaking, especially with psychedelic drugs, I mean, probably 20 to 30% of my clients are with us because they had a very, very stressful life, and then they turned to drugs, especially marijuana. That's one of the top ones, but DMT, acid, ecstasy, you name it. And the drugs actually set them off into a trauma response, or further their existing trauma response. And so that's something that you don't hear about a lot. I understand that now they're kind of using like psychedelics to kind of help treat, like PTSD or whatever. And I'm not saying that I'm against that, but what I am saying is you got to be extremely careful. And what I've seen is there's an element of drug use that a lot of people don't talk about, which is that sometimes it can ruin people's life, like until they get help, at least. And I was one of those people. Marijuana, the THC just destroyed my nervous system, and it coupled with the existing trauma in my body and set me off into an overwhelm point. So you got to be really careful. Medical help. So went to doctors, but no treatment significantly improved my symptoms. Mindfulness basically helped a little bit, but it hasn't eliminated them. Now my biggest challenge is overcoming the anxiety I feel about upsetting others and regaining control about my life. We already talked a little bit about that. This sense of self has been intertwined with my symptoms for so long that I'm uncertain where to start. If you have any advice or guidance on how to address this, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for taking time to read my message, and feel free to reach out if you'd like more information. Okay, well, there you go. We already answered the question. Develop a healthy sense of self, and then have boundaries with people no matter what the cost is. And you can be nice with your boundaries, by the way. You can just be like, hey, sandwich method. That's what I teach people. One positive, one negative, and then one positive. Hey, I really appreciate you offering or asking me to do that. Right now, I just don't have the energy for it or the resources. But again, I really appreciate you asking. And once I'm able to, I promise you I will do it. Right? So boundaries don't have to be aggressive. You can be kind. You can be kindly assertive. Anyway, if you are needing help with these symptoms, click the link below. You can watch my free masterclass. I spent 6 months creating it. I poured my heart and soul into it. It's called the 5 Shifts to Heal from Trauma, Anxiety, Panic, and Depersonalization Realization. At the end, there is an invitation to work with me and my team. There's a button that says book a call. Fill out the application. We'll see what we can do to work with you. We've got a few different options. But anyway, make sure to click like on this video. Send me your story if you want me to read it on YouTube. Comment something and share this. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. Take care. And thank you, Ethan, for sending this story in. That was awesome.